We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops.
Well, I think Putin couldn't be happier. I tell you, they're drinking vodka straight out of the bottle in the Kremlin tonight. It was a great day for Moscow. I think Tulsi Gabbard's role as Director of National Intelligence is going to be extremely harmful to our national security. I think many allies are now going to think twice before they share intelligence with us. I think it'll impair our ability to gain confidence around the world. It was one of his worst nominations, beyond a doubt.
Ambassador John Bolton, thank you for your perspective tonight.
Thank you.
So we're getting security on our money. We're going to have it secured by, they have rare earth and they have oil and gas and they have a lot of other things. And we're asking for security on our money.
So does it mean you are not sending any more
They've agreed to it. Ukraine has agreed to it.
Does it mean you are not sending any more aid to Ukraine?
No, we are, but we want it secured. And the money is going to be secured.
When will the U.S. stop sending funding? When will the U.S. stop sending funding?
Because if we didn't do that, then Putin would say he won. We're the thing that's holding it back. And frankly, we'll go as long as we have to go, because we're not going to let the other happen.
Is forced to surrender its own sovereign territory to Russia. It will be the greatest betrayal of a European ally since Poland in 1945. But President Trump says Ukraine may end up Russian, and he wants American money back. I think we all fear where this could end and the dangerous implications for our defence and our security. So can the Prime Minister reassure this House that he and other European leaders have given sufficient support to President Zalensky so that he can't be bullied by Trump and Putin into accepting a deal who will effectively hand victory to Russia?
Prime Minister.
As he knows, I met President Zalensky in Kiev just a few weeks ago at my 8th meeting. The position since the outbreak of this conflict has been a united position across the House of supporting Ukraine, and I was able to reiterate my position, which is we must put Ukraine in the strongest possible position. That matters now just as much as it mattered at the beginning of this conflict, the strongest possible position, and I did discuss with him what more we can do, what more our allies can do to put Ukraine in the strongest
To Ukraine as well. Yesterday you mentioned that you thought Ukraine's NATO aspirations were one of the main reasons that the war broke out. Who do you blame for the war, Ukraine or Russia?
Well, I think that there were a lot of people to blame. All I can say is very simply, if I were president, that war would never have happened. And you know what?
This is why I cannot just ignore what we heard before. I cannot not comment on the speech we heard by the US Vice President. We fight for your right to be against us. That is the motto, one of the mottos of the Bundeswehr, and it stands for our democracy. This democracy that was just called into question by the US Vice President, and not just the German democracy, but Europe as a whole. He spoke of the annulment of democracy, and if I understood him correctly, he compares the condition of Europe with the condition that prevails in some authoritarian regimes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not acceptable.
Das ist
This is not acceptable. This is not the Europe, not the democracy where I live and where I conduct my election campaign right now. And this is not the democracy that I witness every day in our parliament. In our democracy, every opinion has a voice. And it makes it possible for parties that are partly extremist, such as the AfD, and they can campaign just as any other party. This is democracy. And if the Vice President had the opportunity to switch on his TV set when he arrived yesterday, he would have seen one of those candidates in primetime TV. By the way, we even admit media that spread Russian propaganda, and the representatives of the federal government answer their questions. Nobody is excluded. But democracy does not mean that a vociferous minority will automatically be right, and they cannot decide what truth is. It does not mean that anyone can say anything, and democracy must be able to defend itself against extremists that try to destroy it. I am happy to live in Europe where this democracy is defended every day against its internal and external enemies. And therefore, I would like to explicitly contradict and oppose the impression that Vice President Vance suggested here, that our democracies oppress and silence minorities. We not only know against whom we defend our countries, but also what we defend it for. It's for democracy, for freedom of opinion, for the rule of law and the dignity of each and every one, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, but unlike the Vice President, I would also like to focus my speech on the most pressing questions of European and transatlantic security. The last days have confirmed what many had speculated for months. The United States are pushing for a quick peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and they expect Europe to take the lead in securing any agreement that follows.
Not us, then who will stop them? Really? Let's be honest, now we can't rule out the possibility that America might say no to Europe on issues that threaten it. Many leaders have talked about Europe that needs its own military, an army of Europe. And I really believe that time has come. The armed forces of Europe must be created.
Thanks so much. I never saw your face. I always heard about Axios, that you always, after my phone calls with some leaders, you know what's going on. What was during my phone calls? No, I know it. Really. The information. Where you have your information? Where you get this information? Huh?
He works at the NSA.
Yeah.
So Russia arrests one American, basically, it seems like, in exchange for the release of another. I mean, that's what this appears like. And it also is against the broader backdrop of negotiations going on in the war in Ukraine. What do you make of this?
Well, Pamela, what they're doing is the Russians are playing hardball at this point. They're giving a carrot in the sense of releasing Mark Fogel. Now they're doing a stick approach where they're pulling in somebody else, and there potentially are other people that may be in detention as well at this point. So the idea here that the Russians have is, we'll give you a little bit here, make you feel, the U.S. feel like we're in essence winning on the diplomatic front, and then they'll pull things back. So this really, to me, this portends that the negotiations surrounding Ukraine are going to be incredibly difficult. They are not going to be easy to conduct just because of all the different things that naturally are going to be part of a negotiation of that type between countries like Ukraine, Russia, the European Union, and the United States. Now that you have another U.S. citizen who has been detained by the Russian Customs Service, that then brings out all the other factors, and they're going to use this as leverage against us. That is the goal of the Russians. They're going to make this extremely hard, and I think it's going to take a while to not only get that person released, but also and that's very unfortunate, but also it's going to take a while to achieve any other goals, any other foreign policy goals that the U.S. administration may have with Russia.
All right. Colonel Cedric Layton, Nick Payton-Walsh, thank you so much. We'll be right back.
Yes. Why aren't you going to Israel as part of your trip to the region?
No, our team's work, by the way. I have an invitation to go to Israel. I have a lot of invitations, by the way, and I'm very thankful. I'm very sorry because I really don't have time. You see that usually leaders, but we changed a little bit this practice. Yes, usually leaders, when they go somewhere with an official meeting, they go, it can be 2-3 days or something like this. We changed it during the war because of the war, and so now we go without any additional time for something, and that's why I usually have 1 day 2 visits or 1 day 1 visit, but I had sometimes 1 day 3 visits. Yeah, that's why I don't have now time, because I had a lot of time to spend time here. It's 2 days in Munich for me with pleasure, but I don't have time. That's why I will spend 2 more days for 2 or 3 days for 3 additional countries. I don't have now time.
Okay, Ukrainian.
But when it comes to Russia, Americans don't trust Russia as far as they can throw them. I mean, my goodness gracious, favorable view of Russia. You go back to 2020, Kate, it's 28%. 2022 dropped to 15%. In 2024, just 8% of Americans hold a favorable view of Russia. To put this in context, about as many Americans believe that we faked the moon landing as have a favorable view of Russia. The vast majority of Americans, 61%, actually think of Russia as an enemy. Just 4% think of them as a partner. So the bottom line is views on Russia very, very, very negative.
That's the view of Russia. What about Putin specifically?
What about Putin specifically? I mean, once again, how Americans view Putin. Confident he'll do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. Just 8%. Favorable view of him, of Vladimir Putin. Just 9%. I mean, my goodness gracious, about as many Americans believe that the earth is flat as have a favorable view of Vladimir Putin. So when it comes to Russia, it comes to Vladimir Putin, Americans simply put, do not trust him or the country itself.
Okay, now to the view, another aspect of the view of Russia's war on Ukraine. How do Americans feel about Ukraine using U.S. weapons against Russia?
Yeah, so we spoke about yesterday about how Americans' views of Ukraine have softened, the favorable views, and here we're talking about negative views of Russia. I think this kind of puts in a context about how Americans feel about Russia when matched up against Ukraine. Ukraine using U.S. weapons in Russia. Take a look here. 52% of Americans support that idea compared to just 43% who oppose. Even Republicans are split on this question, basically 50-50, 49% to 49%. So I guess the whole big takeaway here is, yes, views of Ukraine have softened, but Americans really don't trust or like Russia, Kate.
Understandably so.
Yeah.
Given its track record. Thanks, Harry.
Inside the whole, so many of the cities. They haven't done it in Kiev because I guess they don't want to shoot too many rockets in there. They've done it 20%, but they haven't done it 100%. If they wanted to do it 100%, it would probably happen very quickly. But you have cities that are absolutely decimated. And yeah, I would say that, you know, when I have the power to end this war, and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine.
Putin can be trusted in these negotiations?
No. Putin is a war criminal and should be in jail for the rest of his life, if not executed.
Звертаємося до Дональда Трампа. Через тебе, паскуда, президенту Зеленському не відправляли зброю. Тобі більше не бути президентом. Ти зрадник і заплатиш кров'ю за те, що зробив.
Слава Україні!
And I know where such lies lead. President Trump is a failed leader. He will go down in history as the worst president ever. The good thing is that he soon will be as irrelevant as an old tweet. But what are we to make of those elected officials who have enabled his lies and his treachery? I will remind them of what Teddy Roosevelt said. Patriotism means to stand by the country. It does not mean to stand by the president. And John F. Kennedy wrote a book called Profiles in Courage. A number of members of my own party, because of their own spinelessness, would never see their names in such a book, I guarantee you.
With modern times, he criticized capitalism without a conscience. And that's what we have now. We have capitalism without a conscience. He showed the common man being fed through gears of the brutal, dehumanizing industrial age. He took on the American right wing of his day, its worst evils: hatred of immigrants, contempt for the truth, greed, and the abuse of power. We are fighting those same evils today.
Справжні патріоти не ті, які в столиці співають «Ще не вмерли», а котрі їдуть туди, де вмерли.
Добрый день. Очень рад вас видеть. И прежде всего хочу попросить вас наилучшие пожелания Александру Турфанову, нашему гражданину, его близким, в связи с освобождением из плена. Хотел бы сказать, что это стало возможным в том числе благодаря последовательной политике Российской Федерации по ближневосточному урегулированию, что вызывает доверие со стороны многих партнеров региона и благодаря, конечно, доброй воле со стороны руководства Хамаса. Знаю, что испытания были непростыми, и он и вся семья прошли этот период, слава Богу, что дома в кругу своих близких.
Я как раз встретился с ним пару дней назад, в воскресенье. Благодарность вам даже невозможно выразить, потому что мама и он сам просто попросили передать вам огромную благодарность. Даже, потому что как относились к нему. Все время они знали, что вы лично заботились, думали о нем. И даже президент Израиля отправил вам письмо специально выразить благодарность за ваше участие. Мы всегда говорим, что тот, который спасает жизнь одного человека, как будто он спас весь мир.
Well, I think it's regrettable that both presidents, are lashing each other publicly when they both have the same common objective. And one is they both want a peace agreement, and two, they both want an independent, sovereign Ukraine that's enduring, and also its future security is protected. That's what the administration wants, and certainly that's what Zalensky wants. There's one person in this negotiation who doesn't want that, and that's Putin.
לפני הבחירות פיגוע דקירה באנדרטת השואה במרכז ברלין. אבל הערב אנחנו רוצים להכיר את הקנצלר הבא. כשמנהיגי ארצות הברית ורוסיה משלבים ידיים, מאיימים לכפות על אוקראינה הסכם כניעה, כשברית נאטו נראית שברירית מאי פעם, נשאלת השאלה האם זה האיש הנכון בזמן הנכון, מול פוטין ומול טראמפ. Can Friedrich Merz solve this crisis with Trump and the United States? יצאנו לשאול.
Europe at the moment is lacking German leadership. That is very clear. And I think that Friedrich Merz will restore that German leadership again.
He will be taken much more serious because he has a lot of contacts. He has a lot of relations.
I'm sure that Friedrich Merz lays his emphasis on economic, on security, on solving the migration issue.
I think the very pro-Atlanticism, very pro-NATO, very pro-defending Ukraine.
אמרנו פרו-אוקראינה, היום במלאת 3 שנים למלחמה, אמרנו התנגשות עם ארצות הברית של טראמפ. ומרץ לפי כל ההתבטאויות האחרונות שלו אכן בדרך לשם, מחפש אפילו מטריה גרעינית חליפית לזו של האמריקאים, למקרה שברית נאטו תתפרק.
Wir müssen uns darauf einstellen, dass Donald Trump das Beistandsversprechen des NATO-Vertrages nicht mehr uneingeschränkt gelten lässt.
בן 69, עורך דין בהכשרתו, ניסה את כוחו בהתמודדות על הנהגת מפלגתו מול אנגלה מרקל וכשל, עזב את הפוליטיקה לעסקים וחזר, ואז כבש את ראשות המפלגה.
Biden is Putin's flag.
היום מציינים בעולם 3 שנים בדיוק לפלישה הרוסית לאוקראינה. מואב ורדי, אנחנו אליך אתה עם תמונת המצב ממזרח אירופה, ומה צפוי להשתנות עכשיו כשטראמפ בבית הלבן?
ואולי צפוי, כן טלי, תראי, צריך להבין שכשפוטין פולש לאוקראינה הוא למעשה גורם לקריסה של כל הסדר העולמי שניסה המערב לבנות אחרי מלחמת העולם השנייה. הנה, כמו לפני 80 שנה, שוב, מדינה מחליטה לפלוש ולהשתלט על מדינה שכנה בליבה של אירופה. העם האוקראיני ספג כאן מכה נוראה. 92,000 גברים, נשים וילדים אוקראינים נהרגו במלחמה הזאת. עוד כמעט 500,000 מהם נפצעו במהלכה, ו10.5 מיליון אוקראינים איבדו את ביתם או עזבו את אוקראינה. האוקראינים נלחמו בגבורה ומנעו מהצבא הרוסי לכבוש את מולדתם, אבל לא באופן מוחלט. 3 שנים לאחר הפלישה התייצבו הצדדים בגבולות פחות או יותר האלה, כשרוסיה שולטת היום על כ18% משטחה של אוקראינה. ועכשיו הופיע דונלד טראמפ והודיע שזהו, נגמרת מלחמת החפירות, הוא הולך לכפות על רוסיה ואוקראינה הסכם לסיום המלחמה. נחמד, אלא שטראמפ זורק לפח את העמדה המסורתית של אמריקה, שבמשך עשרות שנים הקפידה לעמוד לצד בעלות בריתה מול התוקפנות של ברית המועצות ורוסיה. טראמפ מאמץ את הנרטיב הרוסי בנוגע למלחמה, קורא דווקא לזלנסקי דיקטטור, וטוען שאוקראינה היא האחראית לפתיחת המלחמה הזו. הרעיון של טראמפ אומר שהמצב הזה פשוט יישאר קבוע. אוקראינה תיאלץ להסכים עם שליטה של רוסיה על כ-20% משטחה, אבל מנגד ארצות הברית תערוב לכך שרוסיה לא תכבוש שטחים נוספים ולא תפעל להפלתו של השלטון בקייב. האם זה אפשרי? ייתכן. האם זה יפסיק את שפיכות הדמים? כנראה. אבל כדאי גם לזכור מה יהיה המסר שיצא מהדיל הזה. רודן יכול לפלוש למדינה שכנה, להרוג 10,000 מאזרחיה ולא לשלם על כך מחיר. התוקפנות משתלמת, ואתם יודעים מה? אולי זה בעצם, טלי, העולם על פי דונלד טראמפ.
ימים יגידו. מואב, תודה רבה.
תודה.
בעולם הערבי מציינים